Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the State Water Resources Control Board's Drinking Water and Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program Fee Stakeholder Meeting. My name is David Ceccarelli, and I am the Chief of the Fee and Revenue Branch here at the State Water Board. I will be facilitating this meeting alongside help with the lead manager in the Fee and Revenue Branch, Glen Strohage. So again, I just want to welcome everyone who is participating in this meeting today. Complying with COVID-19 emergency safety guidelines, today's meeting is being held remotely via webcast and Zoom. The meeting handout was originally sent out on March 2nd with an updated version sent out on March 8th. The handout was sent out through the Water Board's fee regulation LIRIS list, along with instructions on how to participate in the Zoom platform. If you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up and receive notifications through the fee regulation LIRIS list. The handout is also posted on the Water Board's fee webpage at www.waterboards.ca.gov/resources/fees/stakeholder. Individuals attending through the Zoom will have an opportunity to ask questions or provide comments during the open discussion part of the meeting. Please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom and staff will click on you and you have an opportunity to go ahead and speak. If you're joining through the webcast, you can also submit comments or ask a question by emailing the email on the screen, which is das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Today, we're having many of the fee and revenue branch staff working behind the scenes to ensure that you experience as few participation bumps as possible. If any time throughout the event you find that you're having technical difficulties, please email das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. And that's the link on the agenda, the handout that was passed out. I just want to acknowledge some of the fee and revenue branch staff that are working behind the scenes, navigating the Zoom, taking emails, Justin Davis, Stephanie Lopez, and also Pooja Vats, who is the manager of the ELAP and drinking water fee programs. Again, we thank you for joining us virtually today. We thank you for your patience as we are moving to this 100% virtual meeting space. We're doing our best to ensure everyone can participate in an effective way. So let's go ahead and go over just a few meeting guidelines. One, remember to use the handouts that were sent to you via email. If you don't have the handouts, don't worry. We're sharing the documents on the screen. You can also request a copy of the documents after the meeting. Remember, if any technical issues come up, please just go ahead and email us. And again, that email is das-drinkingwaterfees@waterboards.ca.gov. Again, the email that was part of the handout. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Remember, you can submit comments and questions throughout the event through sending us an email. So before we review today's agenda, I wanted to just highlight the purpose of today's meeting. This is our first of 3 fee stakeholder meetings as part of the fee setting process for fiscal year 2021-22. Water Code requires the State Water Board to adjust the annual fees each fiscal year to conform to the revenue levels set forth in the Budget Act. Staff reviews all drinking water and ELAP programs fees on an annual basis and holds several stakeholder meetings throughout the year that coincide with the various iterations of the governor's budget. Today, we will be discussing the budgetary expenditures on the Safe Drinking Water Account and the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund from the governor's proposed budget and how these expenditures impact the drinking water and ELAP fees, highlighting the cost drivers from last year's budget to the governor's proposed budget. At today's meeting, since it's early in the fiscal year and we are still determining our current expenditures, revenues, and fund reserve, we'll not be presenting any details of the potential fee adjustments for each program. We will be in a better position to discuss this at a future meeting. We will have follow-up meetings in June to discuss the May revise, and finally a meeting in August to review the enacted budget. Our goal, staff's goal, is to present a fee structure to the board for consideration and adoption at the September 14th, 2021 board meeting. So let's go ahead and just review the agenda here that we're covering today. So again, item number one is the welcome and introductions where we're at right now. Item two is we'll have a discussion on the drinking water budget cost drivers. We have an attachment that goes along with that, which was part of the handout. There was one currently in the January's proposed budget. There was one BCP that has impacts to the safe and drinking water account. We'll go ahead and kind of walk through that, highlight that. And we'll have an open discussion about drinking water. And then we'll move into the ELAP budget cost drivers, which is attachment 2. We'll go through that. Again, we'll have another open discussion. We'll concentrate on ELAP, and then we'll kind of open it up if there's any discussions along with drinking water and or ELAP. And then we'll just talk about next steps. So at this point, again, I want to introduce Glen Strohage, who's one of the lead managers in the feed revenue branch. You might be familiar with him. He's also working on water rights and our water quality fees. So I'll go ahead and let Glen take over for now, and he'll go over the drinking water fund budget cost drivers.
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone to our meeting today. As David said, my name is Glen Strohage. I'm the branch manager for fees. As David indicated, we're here today for our drinking water and ELAP programs. Earlier in February, we did have stakeholder meetings for our other 2 fee programs, water quality and water rights. For the drinking water program, there's actually a 3rd fund for devices. It's a very small fund. We're not presenting anything on that one today. As it stands right now, the fund is self-sufficient. It's not looking like it's going to require any changes to what we collect for devices in the state. If something changes and they may revise, we're not anticipating, we will look to present something on devices at a later date. So for today's meeting, it's a rather simplistic agenda. As David indicated, at this stage, we're just really looking at what's changed budget-wise from when we had fees last year, and then what's in the January proposed budget. So what are the drivers that's increasing some of our costs? I will state for the drinking water program, the state of the fund last year was healthy enough that we were able to go forward with no fee changes for the drinking water program. So we actually did not go to the board last September for drinking water. We'll get into a little bit that here late and shortly, and also in more detail in our next meeting in June. The environmental laboratory accreditation program, that's our second part of our agenda, is a little different story. They went through a number of years going through some regulation changes. We had to wait for our fees to coincide with those new regulations. So I used the term, it was kind of off track, the ELAP program and fees. We actually went to the board last July and changed the fee structure for that program. Obviously, since we just went in July, we didn't take anything to the board in September. But now the ELAP program is synced up with our other fee programs. So the ELAP program, we should be going through these series of 3 meetings on a yearly basis for the ELAP program as well. So with that, this first attachment here relates specifically to the drinking water program and what's referred to as a safe drinking water account. The first box up here shows the fee that we set for, actually where we didn't change fees, but what the fee budget was last year, roughly $28.5 million. The January proposed budget is coming in at around $31.6 million. So the difference is our expenditure appropriation is going up about $3.1 million, or just under 11%. The second box is the core drivers that leads to that $3.1 million. So what are the areas that are either going up, and in this one case, slightly going down? So I'm going to drop down to the second table on here and go through the 4 items that's driving the budget changes from when we were looking at fees last year. First one is state operations. Primarily, this is the salary for state employees. There are some other costs in there. It's relatively flat. Not a whole lot is changing in there. The second one, although it is for employees, is those who were around last year know that through the budget, there was a negotiation between the governor's office and the unions to reduce state employees' salaries. I'm going to round off numbers here. It's just over 9% reduction in salaries for a period of 2 years, depending on how the state revenues were going to be coming into the next year. There is a good chance, based off of information we've received from our control agency, Cal EPA, that the furlough salary savings, as we call them, may go away. So state employees will go back to their normal salaries. What that means is that we were anticipating having less expenditures for the 2 years of salary savings, and there's a chance there may only be one. So I'm going to toss this back to David. He may have some other comments related specifically to furlough salary savings before I go on to the next two items. David, anything you want to add? Oh, David, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, as Glenn mentioned, last year through the fee setting process and kind of with the pandemic and COVID and some of the issues that the governor was facing, that when it was time to come up with the budget last year, that there was negotiations with the unions, and so there was some furloughs put in for state employees. The original direction, of course, that we got pushed us through for 2 years. However, there were some triggers that could remove the furloughs based on overall state revenues. With that said, state revenues seem like they've been coming in pretty hefty throughout the state, which then in the Jan 10th budget basically showed us with the removal of those furlough savings. So, so looking back at basically what happened, and we were able to provide this savings to the fee payers last year, is our employee salaries were reduced again by about 5%. Now those savings are now, we're going back to our full salaries, which is now built into the budget. Again, you know, we'll see what happens when the May revise comes. If this is back into the May revise, then there's a good chance that it's going to stay. And then it's going to be, again, we're going to be back to our regular salaries. So that's, and I, you know, looking at this fund and all of our other funds, you know, each fund is impacted the same. And as we've told the stakeholders, this is basically kind of one of the biggest driving forces is that we're going back to our normal salaries that we had a little over a year ago.
Thank you, David. So again, the second row on the second table, we're projecting about an additional 5% cost to the state as a result of potential of furloughs going away. So on this stage, we're kind of showing, this is kind of the, I'm not gonna say the worst case scenario, but expenditure wise, this could be on the higher end, just to make sure everyone's aware of the fact that last September when we went to the board, we were not anticipating having that increase in costs. So it's roughly about 5% of the fund. The next box down is the one budget change proposal. We use the acronym BCP. Is for 1 PY. I'm going to ask Stephanie if you can quickly just pull this up. So in the agenda, we actually have it linked. This is to the Department of Finance website where they list all the budget change proposals that were included in the January proposed budget. We're not actually going to go through this entire thing. It is available that you can open up, read the detail. If you have any questions during the meeting, great. You can, if you're in the Zoom, you can ask those. If you're on the webcast, you're welcome to send us an email if you have any questions. We do have some program staff online that can address any of the technical issues with this BCP. But again, it's for one staffing. We call it a PY, a personnel year. So if I use the term PY, just understand that basically means one staff person is going to be augmented into the program at $206,000 cost for the fund. So that's one cost driver. Stephanie, if you can go back to attachment 1, please. Thank you. So that was the third line. The fourth line, that's a cost driver, is what's called Prorata. These are operational expense for other agencies in the state that support the state water boards. These numbers can fluctuate year to year. Over the last few years, there's been a change in the allocation methodology through our different fee funds. So Prorata is charged to all of our programs. So we mentioned before, the ELAP program has Prorata, the water rights, water quality. They all take a portion of what's costed to us for the water boards. There has been some changes over the years, depending on if the allocation was based off the total fund size versus the number of staff that are allocated to each of the funds. So as our budget and our accounting office go through some of those fundamental changes with the control agencies, there are some adjustments from time to time. The drinking water program is resulting in about a 5% increase to the fund related to that. So again, I'm going to see if David has any other high-level comments related to Prorata he wants to throw out there before we move on.
So, you know, our budget office works closely with the Department of Finance on the overall state water board's Prorata cost. And Department of Finance does give us a direction. The way that it's prorated, or the share of each fund, is based on the number of employees and the number of the salary and benefit amounts that are associated with each fund. So we get direction from the Department of Finance, and we spread that out to all of our funds. There have been times where, you know, we've been able to do some kind of internal adjustments where we've had to kind of back money out of some of the funds, but for the most part, you know, we get direct direction from the Department of Finance how to spread these costs over to each of the funds. And as Glenn mentioned, that, you know, these are essential services that, you know, all agencies and departments pay for, such as control agencies like the Department of Finance, state controllers, treasurers. You know, again, any of these agencies that help support, you know, the state agencies' workforce, basically, and driving to, you know, any of our missions and things like that.
All right, thank you, David. So the net result of all this is, budget-wise, this fund is going up 10.9. So I'm just going to round it off to 11%, and we're listing out the primary drivers. So there's two core drivers here: the potential removal of the furlough salary savings, and the adjustment for Prorata compared to last year. So at this stage, as David mentioned before, we're not making any proposals as far as impacts to fees. This set of data does show that operationally, costs are going up about 11%. Over the spring, some of you are familiar with the state accounting system called FisCal. Our accounting office is working to finalize data from the prior fiscal year. We should have that in a couple of weeks. That will allow us to kind of assess how we stand in our fund. Our target for the safe drinking water account is between 5 and 10% reserve based off of our allocated expenditures. So when we crunch the numbers, we see how our fund is balanced out. We'll be able to make some recommendations as to what we think fees may need to be changed, most likely at our June meeting. Obviously, as we get into the August stakeholder meeting and then heading into the September board meeting to make any changes. So that's all I have to present on this account. What I want to do now is open up anyone who's already on the Zoom platform that may have some questions, and then we'll ask Stephanie if we've received any email questions. So do we have anyone on the Zoom platform that have any questions related to the drinking water and the safe drinking water account?
Glenn, there are no email questions.
Okay. So I tend to try to give it a few moments. Those that are on the webcast, there could be anywhere from a 15-second to maybe a 45-second delay, depending on their internet connection speeds. So at this point in time, I kind of just wait a few extra seconds to wait for the video feeds to catch up. Do note that anyone who's on the webcast, if you do send in an email and there is a lag on your connection, we will get the question. It may be a few minutes before we get around to presenting the question and trying to answer that. So again, Yes.
I'm sorry. I was just going to mention for those on the Zoom, please go ahead and use the virtual hand feature within Zoom, and we'll go ahead and take any questions through that to the Zoom platform.
And again, we'll have another chance later on in the meeting if anyone is interested in drinking water that may not be currently available on Zoom or the webcast. We can always circle back to it at the end of the meeting for the final open discussion. So with that, go ahead, David.
Glenn, let me just add one other thing also. I know we'll mention this at the end of the meeting, but for those that may be looking at the spreadsheet and then maybe have further questions after the meeting, please don't hesitate to reach out to Glen or I. We'll be more than happy to kind of walk through the budget cost drivers, what we know. And if you want a one-on-one meeting or meet with a smaller group, we're more than happy to do that.
Okay, so Stephanie, one more check. Any emails before we move on?
No, not at this time.
Okay, and not seeing anyone standing up on the Zoom platform. Again, we'll circle back to this at the end of the meeting, but we'll go ahead and move into the next agenda topic. So Stephanie, if you can put the agenda back up real quick, and then we'll go to attachment 2. Okay, so we're going to move to agenda item number 3. Again, we use the acronym ELAP, the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, budget cost drivers. And here's attachment 2. Thanks, Stephanie. So very similar to what we just did for the drinking water. This fund is actually called ELIF. And I'm not sure, David, because you said it was the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund. I have the investment fund in here. So we'll have to get our I words cleaned out to make sure we're using the proper term here. But ELIF is a relatively small fee fund. It's just over $4 million in total. Compared to the drinking water, which is 25, rounding off here. I should have looked at my previous one. That's $31 million program. So it's smaller. I had mentioned on the drinking water side, we tend to try to have a fund reserve of 5 to 10%. Since this fund is smaller, when we get to the stage of looking at the condition of our fund, we'd be looking maybe eventually targeting a 10 to 15% reserve just because it's smaller in nature. But the layout here is the exact same we just went over for drinking water. The ELAP had a fee budget last year of around $3.8 million. The current January proposed budget has expenditures of 4.3. So the net change is it's going up $500,000, which is a 13% increase from what we were looking at last year. And the drivers, 3 of these are the same that we had for the drinking water. The only difference is there is no budget change proposal or BCP in play for this program. So there's 3 lines. State operations, very similar to the drinking water, had a very small reduction. The furlough, removal of the furlough salary savings. Drinking water, it came right at 5% for this program. It was calculated at 5.3% change. And then Prorata is a little bit higher here, 8%, where I believe in the drinking water, it was, let me look at my little chart here, it was 5.4. The main reason why ELAP is taking a higher percentage is because it's a smaller fund. Depending on the allocation of Prorata in the past, not all charges were proportionally going to this program. So again, as our accounting office and our budget office, changes and works with the Department of Finance on how to allocate overhead costs, they're trying to true up and make sure they're consistent with all their funds. So I don't have a whole lot to go over here because it's very similar layout that we had for drinking water. I'm going to hand it over to David if you have any additional comments on any of the cost drivers or the fund in general.
I don't. Just to clarify, and we'll fix that. The title is the Environmental Laboratory Improvement Fund, not investment. So we'll go ahead and make sure that that's changed as appropriate. No, just as Glenn mentioned that we're still looking at our revenues and our expenditures. We're internally working with our accounting office, and we're we're anticipating having those by the end of March, which would allow us to be in a better position, of course, to discuss the entire fund at our June meeting. And then, of course, we look at the current expenditures and how that affects, and of course, our revenue. So again, basically what we're showing right now is what the percentage of the budget allocation goes up from one year to the other. And in both of these funds, what's basically happened is that we're going back to our regular salaries and to our normal salaries, and that was in the governor's proposed budget. So like this one in the drinking water, and of course what we talked about for water rights and water quality, we're back to normal salaries. So there is, we were able to provide a kind of a 1-year savings there, but now kind of, based on the proposed budget, we're back to those standard salaries. And then, we're showing, of course, what the prorata is. As I look at it, if we were kind of removing the prorata, the furlough savings of that 5%, we'd be around kind of the standard where we're just paying for our regular state operations and our prorata cost. So I think there's definitely more to come. I just don't want to, it's important for everyone to understand kind of what those cost drivers are when you look at the fund itself, moving from last year to this year. And then having a sense of course, kind of how much revenue we may need to generate to cover our total budgetary cost. Now, again, when we come into the June meeting, we'll have a better idea on the overall fund and what that reserve looks like. And we'll be able to provide a little bit more detail on what potential fee increases may look like, or fee adjustments.
Thank you, David. So I do want to add on for the ELAP program. We have some challenges that we're working with program to identify heading into that June meeting. A lot of it is around the fact that we adopted a new fee structure in July. Anytime that you put in a new structure, there's a lot of uncertainty with the new regulations for the ELAP program, which of the laboratories are going to get accredited through the water boards, are going to have their assessments on a third party, the number of FOAs, because we changed how we're assessing fees. It takes a number of years for some of that to settle down. We actually went, I think it was about 9 months without generating fee notices for that program. So there is some delay in some of the revenue. So we're just bringing this up, the fact that with the new structure from last July, the nature of having things settle out over a number of years and come to a nice stasis or landing spot gives a lot of uncertainty. And then we've had the challenges with our accounting implementation to the fiscal statewide financial system of getting live, accurate, and timely reports. Our accounting office is almost caught up to where we would normally be at this time of year. Last summer, when we went to the board, we were about 2 years behind in some of our reports. Now we're finishing up the prior year, so we're almost caught up to the 1 year behind, and then we'll be able to get into our normal current year reports fairly quickly. So we're almost to the state that we need to be at to accurately predict where we think our fund's going to be. And then with our budget and with our projected revenues, all of that factors in when we go to our board with any recommendations we have for fee changes. So with that, very similar to drinking water, budget-wise, this fund is going up right now about 13%. The two primary drivers are the furlough salary savings potentially going away. Again, we thought that was going to be in there for 2 years. There's a chance that it may only last for the current year for a single year. And then the adjustment with Prorata, that hopefully that will stabilize as well as we go forward into future years. So with that, like we did with drinking water, we'll open up the floor for anyone on Zoom that may have any questions or comments. And then we'll also check with Stephanie to see if we've received any email questions or comments.
Hi, Glenn. There are no questions at this time.
Okay, so again, we'll give it a moment. Again, with the delay on some of the webcasts, anyone who may submit something at the last moment, we'll try to hang on here for a little bit. While we're doing that, we can talk about next steps. As David had indicated, this is the first of 3 annual meetings that we'll have. The next one will be in June, based off the May revised budget. That's the one that we're hoping we're going to have some more detail as far as our impacts to fees. We probably won't propose anything in June, but we'll give some idea of what we think fees may have to go up, whether or not it's based off our revenue projections, what's in the May revise, or what are our expenditures, and then the condition of the fund, how solvent are we? We'll kind of wrap all those together and give an indication that, we think fees will have to go up X percentage points. The August meeting is where, if we're going to have any alternatives for fee increases, we would probably discuss alternatives. Obviously going with the board, any recommendations we're going to have to take to our board for their consideration on what they're going to adopt in September. So David, I'm going to pass it back to you to see if you have any other comments as we just give a few extra moments for anything on the webcast to get any questions in.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the specific date. So our next drinking water and ELAP meeting will be in June, and it's scheduled for June 10th in the morning from 9 to 11. And as of right now, for the most part, it'll be on the same type of platform to the Zoom and the webcast, unless of course we hear differently. So we'll definitely be sending out information. Our agendas usually go out about a week prior to the meeting. So 1st of June that the meeting handouts will come out.
And as David mentioned earlier, always feel free to reach out to David and myself. Our unit manager is Pooja Vats, so you can reach out to any of us. Obviously, those of you who work with the program side, whether or not it's more specific to the drinking water side or the environmental laboratory side of the house, we coordinate with the program staff on a regular basis. So again, if you don't have questions right now and something comes up to you anytime soon, or while we're waiting to get to the June meeting, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll make sure we open up that dialogue and communication with you.
Let me make one correction. I mentioned June 10th. It's actually June 11th. June 11th, drinking water and ELAP fee stakeholder meeting. Again, we'll have more information posted on our fee webpage, and then agenda and handouts will be passed out 1 week prior. So early June, we'll have all of our handouts. So again, I apologize for the confusion, but it'll be June 11th. That's our tentative scheduling date for the next drinking water and ELAP fee stakeholder meeting.
All right, we got our first hand up. I feel like a teacher calling on the classroom. So it looks like someone from the Clean Water Association. I don't have a name, so whoever raised your hand, you've got the floor.
Well, thank you, Glenn. It's Debbie Webster with the Central Valley Clean Water Association. And can you go over one more time again? Because I'm just trying to understand it. So when I looked at the water Prorata, it's on the drinking water side, it's about 5.4, but when you look at it, the ELAP, it's about 8%. Yep. What makes that difference?
David, you want to field this one? Or you want me to?
Well, go ahead, Glenn, and then I'll jump in.
So the allocation methods may have changed from what was done last year. So I know a number of years ago, and I'm not involved in this allocation process, it was often done at the fund level. So whatever the fund itself was, not necessarily based on the number of staffing. I know in the last year or two, the focus has been to distribute the pro rata based off the number of staff allocated to the programs. There were also some cases, and David might have some more information on this, where the water board made a determination that a single fund, maybe I'm making up, maybe it's the underground storage tank cleanup fund or some other fund. That's just an example. It's not necessarily that was the one it happened to. May have picked up a little higher share for various allocation methods. So in a way, someone picks up a higher share, another fund may pick up a little lower share. But as they change the allocation method, you're going to see some adjustments in the short term. David?
Yeah, so Glenn's correct there. One of the primary determinations of the share of pro rata to each of the funds is one, the number of staff, and then those classifications of those staff. Of course, if you have higher level staff, of course, you're getting higher salaries and higher benefits, and their IDC rates probably a little higher and things like that. So they do look at the total cost. Our organization over the years, especially this program here, I will say that kind of when it came into the program, to the water board, we did subsidize a little bit with general fund. We looked at try to pushing some of those pro rata costs to some of the other funds if we could. And again, this is a total internal budget process. With that said, last year or so, we've kind of trued it up. And we have the direction from finance to of how to allocate it. So and as Glenn mentioned, it looks like it's a little higher percentage, but it's a smaller fund, of course. And compared to, of course, the drinking water, which is more of like a $30 million fund, and is overall looking at all those positions, and of course the number, the staffing and their classifications as a whole, basically.
So Debbie, did that answer your question?
I think it starts to, obviously it's just understanding the ins and outs. I guess, as I look at it for the constituencies of labs, they saw a huge increase last year that was supposed to cover the cost. And it doesn't look like you're adding that, but it's still, this is a huge, significant increase. And so understanding why this is being such a large portion of it, more than 50% of the driver of the increase, trying to understand why and how would be really helpful.
And I can, and Debbie, we could reach back out. I was talking with our budget officer this morning a little bit, and we could reach out to the Department of Finance. It's our overall pro rata will continue to go up just because of just specifically our organization at the water board. We're paying for all those classifications at finance, at controllers, at treasurers. I mean, we're paying our portion, right? So when their costs go up, there's just a bigger spread to each of the departments or organizations. So then, we have to look at our funds and how to spread that out. I will, we'll talk with the Department of, internally, we'll talk to budgets, and then see if we can, get a little clearer picture with Department of Finance, and a little clearer explanation on that share pro rata, how it affects ELAP, and then ultimately we know that that's passed on to the fee payers.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and we did get one email question. It was from, I'm trying to read off of my side computer here, Josie Tellers from the city of Davis. The gist of the question is that the new ELAP fees were adopted last July, but based off the delay in the implementation of the new regulations to July 1st of this year, those fees that were adopted in July did not actually take effect until this past January 1st. So that is a correct statement, Josie. Just because of the nature of the budget, we may have to still go to our board to potentially increase fees going into the next fiscal year cycle. So some people will look at it as, hey, my fee was only effective for 6 months, January 1 through the end of June. That's the 6-month period. And then if we go to the board, it'll be fees for this coming July 1 through next June. So yes, again, when we went to set fees back in July, we were just looking at an adopted budget that came in just a few weeks prior to setting the fees. And then obviously the two changes we're talking about here that's on the screen is the furlough salary savings. We had just assumed based off the negotiations that would carry over for the second year. That might not be the case. And then the pro rata adjustment. Unfortunately, this is the fund that has a little higher percentage. More than likely, it was probably taking a smaller proportional share last year, and it's now being reappropriated in a different methodology. So Josie, if you're on the email, if you have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to send those, and we'll try to get those addressed as well. So we'll give it another moment just to see if anyone else has any questions. And then we'll see if we get it. Stephanie, any other email questions come through besides for Josie?
No other questions, Glenn.
Okay. So with that, David, I'm trying to slow play it here to get a little extra time for those on the feed. But I think you can go ahead and start our wrap up if you would like.
So yeah, thank you, Glenn. Again, you know, we'll just take a moment here just to see if anything comes in. So please interrupt me if anything does come in, but as of right now, I don't see anything. So as I mentioned, next steps, we'll be looking for the May revise that'll come out. And then after that, we'll go ahead and internally, we know, our budget office, accounting office, the fees, we take a look at it, make some determinations. We work closely with program staff. And then with that said, our next meeting will be June 11th. We'll have further discussions. One action item here had to do with Prorata. I'll be working with our budget office, and you know, we'll have some kind of internal conversations internally, and then try to loop finance in to see if we can get a kind of a better explanation on the actual dollar amount for finance for ELAP and the drinking water program. And you know, as Glenn mentioned, you know, we're always open to, you know, helping assist on this process. If anyone has any questions, you can always, of course, email Glenn or I, or just pick up the phone, give us a call. We could always set up a meeting, kind of have one-on-ones, and if needed, if we need program staff involved, we'll be more than happy to coordinate with program and have either drinking water or ELAP staff involved in our meetings. So with that said, let me just kind of ask one more time, any email or Zoom questions that came through?
There are no email questions, David.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank staff for assisting in this process. And then I want to thank all the stakeholders and everyone that participated today. We appreciate the process. We can't do it without you. We always like to listen and hear your feedback. It assists us moving forward when we do have to do fee adjustments. So again, we're definitely appreciate your feedback that you provide us. You know, we're always here to help provide the transparency of our funds. And as you can see with the cost drivers through the budget process. And we'll, again, be looking forward to meeting with you in June. So with that said, I will sign off. And Glenn, I thank you, and thank all staff. And we'll see everyone in June. Thanks again.